Hello guys, I thought I'd just do a quick video and give you an idea of where I started off in the digital world, and hopefully this will be a guide to you to decide what you want to do in regards to upgrades. So I started using the Canon 450D 8 megapixel camera. It was great, but at some point I thought it was a bit limiting and I upgraded to the 600D. After a period of time using that, I found the buffer was quite slow. It only could do about 6 frames per second before it started buffering, and I had to wait for it to offload those images to the memory card. And then I thought, right, I need to upgrade my equipment significantly. And I upgraded it to the 7D, the original. And it had a really good buffer. I could do about 19 raw images before the buffer started buffering images to the SD card. And I found that great, and it was really useful and fast and quick. It had 8 frames per second, really great. Then I thought, I'm a bit disappointed with the video capabilities of this camera because it didn't have dual pixel autofocus. That means autofocus in video. And I upgraded to the 80D. The 80D was a great camera, don't get me wrong, but it couldn't do 4K, and I just felt I needed to up my game a little bit. I had to come down in the frames per second because the 7D could do 8 and the 80D could do about 7. And then I felt at some point I'd like to upgrade that, and I eventually went the 90D route. And then soon after that I bought the 7D Mark II that we've got here, which obviously was better than the original 7D I had. Comparing this camera, comparing it up against the 90D, there are significant differences. Obviously, the 90D had 32 megapixels. This is only 20, but this had superior autofocus capabilities. It was quicker to autofocus, but obviously the 90D had better video functionality, and it had a flip-out screen. That was the main reasons why I went for the 90D. But then I used to always think, I've always wanted to buy the 7D Mark II. And you know, it is a workhorse. It's built like a tank. It's built to the same grade of one of the 1D bodies, and it is a solid performer. So I bought that, and then as time went on, I felt that I'd prefer to work with full frame, because I remember going to Whitby once because I had bought a second-hand 5D Mark II camera, and I took some portrait images at an event that I went to. And I was blown away with the clarity and the sharpness of full frame. So if you're considering APS-C versus full frame, I would say APS-C is better for sports and wildlife, but it doesn't say you can't do that on full frame. But full frame is a lot better for doing weddings and portraiture and still life and landscape work. So that's my take on full frame versus APS-C. So here we have a kit that I've decided to sell because I've decided to go the route of full frame. I prefer it. I think you get sharper results out of full frame lenses. Let me just get my 100-400 Mark II L lens, which is a full frame lens. I find putting this on full frame gives me better results than it does on APS-C. I'm not saying it gives me more telephoto capabilities, it just gives me more sharpness. My opinion is that you get sharper images on full frame cameras with full frame lenses than you do when you put a full frame lens on an APS-C crop sensor camera. Because what you got to remember is APS-C has a disadvantage and an advantage over full frame. The advantage is it has a 1.6 crop. What that means is you times your longest focal length, like 400mm, by 1.6, that gives you 640mm. The disadvantage though is when it comes to wide angle or doing vlogs or blogs, you know, filming yourself, where you need a wide angle lens. And the 100mm at the wide end of this lens becomes 160mm, which is a problem, especially if you like doing wide angle stuff. So that's why it's probably not always a good idea to use full frame lenses on APS-C cameras. So we've got a selection of APS-C lenses here that I think are great. So here we have the Canon EFS 18-55 STM lens, and that gives you a reasonably wide shot, as well as being able to do portraiture work with it. I'm not going to lie to you, it's not the sharpest lens in the world, but it's, as an all-round really light lens, it's fantastic. So in the telephoto world, we have the STM 55-250. I know there's other lenses out there, but this is the STM lens. This is equivalent in the full frame world as of 400mm, and this is actually a brand new lens. I've never really used it, but I found it to be really sharp. It's just I've got other lenses that I can use, you know, and I've never really used this that much, if at all. It's stabilised. All these lenses are stabilised, and I think you can pick these up really cheaply. You know, I think you can pick them up for about £200 brand new. I think you can pick up the kit lens, the STM 18-55, for about £80 to £100. And then another lens I would recommend, and I think it's really, seriously speaking, the only option really for APS-C cameras, because you can't really put full frame wide angle lenses on an APS-C camera. It doesn't give you a wide enough field of view, you know. So this is a 10-18mm. That sounds really wide, doesn't it? But when you equate the crop factor on these lenses, it isn't really 10mm at the wide angle. It's closer to 16. But in the full frame world, you'll pick up lenses between 16 and 35mm quite easily. So if you was to equate, if you wanted a lens that gives you a similar field of view that you would get on full frame that's quite wide, I'd highly recommend the 10-18 STM lens. So I'm actually selling this kit on because I have upgraded my equipment to the mirrorless system, Canon's mirrorless cameras that have been coming out, because I wanted to focus on full frame. I prefer full frame, I've always liked it better. I remember when I went to Whitby and I had an old 5D Mark II, and I took some portraiture images with that, and the images were so crystal clear. The clarity from the lens I was using, which was the 24-70 f4 macro IS lens, I bought that for about £500, as memory serves me correct. And when I took some portraiture imagery at this event using the 5D Mark II full frame camera, I was blown away at the clarity of the images, the sharpness. I just preferred it over APS-C. But I'm not saying APS-C cameras won't do the job. I just don't think they're as sharp as full frame cameras are. And I've always, when I started doing some testing, I've done a lot of testing on full frame lenses, that I find on full frame cameras, full frame lenses perform better, a lot better than they do on APS-C. There's a lot of YouTubers out there who don't tell you this, and it does annoy me a lot. You know, the likes of Tony Northrup, the likes of Jared Pollan, the likes of Toby Rec TV. There's probably others out there, but I just wanted to mention them because they don't mention something called diffraction. Now, if you don't know what diffraction is, it's basically when you start stopping your lens down quite away, and it introduces softness in your images. So what I noticed on APS-C cameras, when you use full frame lenses, for example, was you got diffraction in your images around f16, which is relatively a small aperture, but not a super small aperture. And yet if I do the same thing with a full frame lens, like this Canon 100-400, and put this on, say, I don't know, a 5D Mark III, 5D Mark IV or something like that, or my EOS R that I've been testing, I found diffraction was barely noticeable at f16. In fact, I couldn't even see at f22. So that's something that a lot of these so-called photography channels don't tell you about, because I've done some test charts, I've looked at images, and I've reached out to a few people on YouTube, and they say I don't see it on my 7D Mark II, but they're just looking at you know, images in the field. They're not looking at test charts like I do, and I can tell the difference in image quality versus when it comes to full frame versus APS-C using full frame lenses. Every single time the full frame camera will trump the APS-C camera, every time. I've done tests and tests. Check my channel if you want to see the evidence, see the proof, but that's something I have noticed. So, but it's not to say that APS-C cameras are not very good. They're extremely good for what they do, but personally, if you want the best sharpness out your camera, your APS-C camera, get APS-C lenses. Now I know Sigma do a DC range of them, I know Tamron do a range of them, and I did have, I can't remember what it was called, I think it was the Nano STM. It was a very expensive lens that Canon did. I think it was the if I remember, was it the 18 to 105, something like that, and that was crystal clear sharp. I did some extremely intense testing on that lens, and what I found was it was incredibly sharp on the APS-C camera. One thing I did want to touch on is the effect of megapixels. Now on the APS-C camera, all your pixels are crammed into a very small space, which means it's extremely challenging on full frame lenses, and it's very possible that a full frame lens that you've got might not be able to resolve the resolution that your APS-C camera can achieve because of the smaller pixels. That's why full frame is a little bit better, because it is able to capture more light because the pixels are bigger, and it's less challenging on the lens rather than an APS-C is. Anyway, going back to the kit that I've got here, because you might be interested to know what I'm selling this for. So this entire kit that I'm selling this for is a reasonable price of £1,000. I think it's quite reasonable considering we've got 4 32 gigabyte CF SD sorry, they're not SD cards, they're CF cards, compact flash cards. We've got 3 lenses, so we've got the 18 to 55, the 55 to 250, and the 10 to 18. That covers our wide angle. So we're basically getting the equivalent of, in terms of full frame terms, of 16mm, which is really wide, useful for doing indoor property photography if you want to get large rooms in the shot, all the way up to 400mm, which is a really good telephoto range on an APS-C camera. So this kit is really going to be for someone that wants to step up from their Rebel cameras. You know, I want to go from a Rebel camera and I want a Pro camera, but I can't afford a 1D body. They're too expensive. They're out of my price range. What can I get in the APS-C world? Because you may have some APS-C lenses yourself, and you may not want to go the full frame route. Because if you go to the full frame route, you've got to buy full frame lenses, and full frame lenses are A, heavier, B, expensive, and C, bigger. And you may think, I still want to keep that form factor, you know. So I think for anyone who is, you know, a semi-pro, someone who is looking to advance their photography from a student level to an intermediate level, I would recommend getting hold of the 7D Mark II with its 20 megapixels. It's 10 frames per second shooting. It's fantastic autofocus. The only thing I think is lacking in the 7D Mark II is it has no articulated screen. So I'll have to show you that. The screen on the back is fixed, and you can't rotate out and see yourself. That's the only disadvantage. But if you can live with that, I think you would be extremely happy with this sort of a kit. I hope I've not rambled on too much about video in this video, and give you a rough idea of what I think are the advantages and disadvantages of APS-C. Yes, there are some disadvantages, especially if you want to put a full frame lens on an APS-C. Remember, you're always going to have to times the focal length by 1.6, which is great for telephoto reach. Always great. It's always fantastic to have more reach on a camera lens. However, when you want to step back and get something in shot that's wide, then you're limited to choices. So you'd have to get a really expensive full frame lens to be able to get a wide field of view. The other option you have is get yourself an APS-C lens, such as the EFS 10 to 18. I know Sigma do the 17 to 50 DC, and I think Tamron do their own equivalent. Incidentally, that Sigma lens I would highly recommend. It's an APO older lens, but it's a 2.8 aperture, which means it lets a lot of light in. But you know, I just hope I didn't confuse you too much in this video. But as a startup, as an intermediate package, I would recommend the 7D Mark II with these three lenses to be going on with, and then at some point, if you decide you want to up your game into the full frame world, then you could consider, if you want to stick with digital SLRs, you could go for the 5D Mark III that you could pick up really cheaply because everyone's selling those and upgrading. The 5D Mark IV, which will have 4K capability, so you can do 4K video. Or if you want to go beyond that, obviously there's the EOS R. I'm filming on the EOS R, and I find it to be a fantastic camera. I love it. I love the video capabilities of this camera. Even though it has a 1.7 crop when it comes to 4K video, I can live with that. You know, and it's actually beneficial, that crop factor sometimes. The crop factors can have disadvantages when you want to go wide. However, if you want to go long, it's great. Having a crop factor is brilliant. It means you don't need to buy another lens. It just makes your existing lens longer. Sigma would label it as an effective increase in focal length. That's their typical term. But in another term, it's your angle of view might be, I don't know, 10 degrees. And then the crop factor on your camera might change that to 5 degrees. Meaning you can photograph through steel mesh in a zoo and not get the mesh in your shot because the angle of view is so small, it's zooming right through the steel, metal, corrugated fencing, and you're not getting any of that in your shot, and you're getting the animal in your shot as clear as day. But that's the benefit of the crop factors, especially the APS-C cameras with their crop factor. It's great, but not so great if you want to go wide. Just remember that. Ideally, I suppose, you might want to have a full frame camera with a wide angle lens on there for doing your portraits, for doing your landscapes, and then have an APS-C camera for doing your telephoto work, such as your wildlife, your sports, your aircraft shows, your if you're a aircraft hobbyist or someone that goes to airports to take pictures of aircraft, you may prefer your APS-C camera for that. But for your portraiture work, your weddings, and obviously doing landscapes, you may prefer using a wide angle lens on a full frame camera. I hope I haven't confused you too much, but make your own mind up. Let me know in the comments what you think would suit you. Are you someone that likes your telephoto lenses, or is it are you someone that loves your portraiture work, Or are you someone that just loves landscapes? Let me know in the comments and I'll try and advise you if I can and let you know what I think you should go for. But don't always let people tell you what to do. Make your own mind up through, you know, through debate, and then you can decide what fits your requirements, your needs, and then just go with your gut really. If you think you want a crop sensor camera, buy a crop sensor camera. If you want a full frame camera because it lets more light in for doing low light events indoors, go for a full frame camera. Just remember though, you'll always be guided by budget, and it's what you can afford, not what you can dream about buying. And try not to do what I do, which is load it on my credit card and pay it off over a period of time, because it can be quite soul destroying having to pay off lenses and cameras all the time when you just want to relax and enjoy your life. So what I would always recommend is, you know, make a decision of what you can afford, and then buy what you can afford, and then save up for, you know, additional things you want in life. Anyway, hope to see you in the next video. As always, remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video. I really would appreciate it. It just helps people find these videos, because YouTube isn't very helpful to the small guys on YouTube with their small YouTube channels. It's all geared to the big channels like the Tony Northrups of the world, the Gerard Pollins, the Toby Rex. You know, those small guys just need all the help in the world to get bigger. Anyway, hope to see you in the next video. Have a nice day and keep smiling and keep taking pictures, and more importantly than watching videos about gear, get out there, take pictures and take some pictures.